everybody, welcome back to another video here on my channel. It is the beginning of February, which of course means that I am here to do my January wrap up, and January was actually my best month yet. Not so much with like ratings of books or like if I found like the really great books. I still haven't found a 5-star read. I've read the most books that I've ever read in January, which was great. So let's go ahead and get into my wrap up. I have my little reading journal, reading binder. Look at that, 10 books. Look at all that on this paper. I feel like I did so well. The first book that I actually finished in January was The Girl on the Train. I ended up reading this in my 24-hour reading challenge, reading thrillers for basically like a week. I started this and finished this in the second week of January. I didn't read for a whole week, the whole first week of January, but I actually rated this book 3 stars. This year, I'm kind of being not too strict, but a little bit more strict about how I was rating. I started off last year doing that, but I didn't really stick with it. And then at the end of the year, I went back through and kind of changed in my wrap up, my yearly wrap up, a few of my ratings because I didn't feel like they were still the same rating. So this year I kind of want to be a little bit more like strict or think about my ratings a little bit better. So I rated this one 3 stars. It's basically about this girl. Her name is Rachel. She goes to London and back. She works out in London and then I can't remember where she lives, but basically she's always on this train. She just passes by a place, this house, which actually used to be on the same street that she used to live on. And there's this person who she made up this whole life for this girl. She called her a different name. She also called the husband a different name. That she made up a whole life about them because she was only on the train. She didn't actually know them. Later on, she finds out that the female is actually missing. She starts trying to connect the dots a little bit because she's also in a way puts herself into the situation to where she's kind of wrapped up and like talks to the police because she thinks she has a little bit of like a clue or something that might help them. And then she gets wrapped up into the whole case. This is a thriller. I actually enjoyed it. It was sitting on my shelf for a very long time and I just finally decided I wanted to read it. And I actually enjoyed it a lot. And since I was getting out of my slump, I feel like it really helped the start of me fully getting out of my slump. Then I went back to the Chronicles of Narnia. You will be seeing this book a lot in this wrap up. I physically only have 6 books to show, but a lot of the books are coming from this, and that's how I got 10 full books that I read in January. I actually ended up reading the 3rd book, The Horse and His Boy. It was just over 100 pages and I also rated it 3 stars. I feel like I'm not really gonna have to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia. If you haven't heard or seen the movies or anything about this series, I highly recommend it, but it is in a way, because it's older style, a little bit more for children, but it's not bad to read. It is still a very good classic type story. My 3rd book was also from the Chronicles of Narnia and it was Prince Caspian. Again, I rated it 3 stars. Then halfway through the month, I ended up picking up Beautiful Creatures and I enjoyed this. This is a YA fantasy. There's 4 books in the series. Each book is around 500 pages, but in all honesty, I just read 100 books of Beautiful Chaos today. It is the 2nd of February. I'm already over page 200. I pretty much read like 100 pages a day. So yes, they are pretty big, but at the same time, if you're actually into the series, because I've seen that a lot of people rated the series like 1 stars. Apparently this was hyped in, I do believe, 2018, 2019. I don't think I've actually ever seen anybody read this in particular. If you haven't heard me already talk about it in 2 other videos, this is a book about a male main character. It's also in his point of view. His name is Ethan Waite and he always lived in this one place in South Carolina called Gatlin. It's like a small town. He grew up there. His family was from there way before the Civil War, and basically he lives in a plantation house. And then there are 2 plantation houses in the entire town that did not burn down. One became the museum, and it's like, if I remember correctly, it's around town. And then on the outskirts of town, there's actually another plantation home, which is the oldest and the most scariest surviving house. Everybody calls it like the haunted house. They avoid it like the plague, and also they avoid the guy living there who technically is this uncle to this female who ends up showing up, and somehow Ethan and this female, her name is Lena, end up being magically connected. And then they have to basically go and figure out, there's like the song that keeps playing called 16 Moons in this book. They have to figure out things about her because she's magic. They call it the Castor world. It's both Castor world and also the mortal world combining together, and there's secrets about his town that he never guessed, he never knew of. There's secrets about his family that involved the Castor world, and there's just a lot of things that happen in this book that I really enjoyed, and I rated this one 4 stars. I had a really good time reading it and I was really excited to pick up the 2nd book. But before I ended up picking up the 2nd book, more so before I finished the 2nd book, I ended up reading 3 more stories of the Chronicles of Narnia: The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and also The Last Battle. Each of them are, like I said, around 100 pages, so about 300 give or take pages. But I ended up finishing this entire book, The Chronicles of Narnia. I rated all of these books in this whole series 3 stars just because they were pretty good, but they're not something that's going to stick with me. I had all my questions answered because the whole reason I started this is because I've seen a TikTok that spoiled the ending to the movies and I wanted to know if it was the same in the books. There was also also the few times that I felt like I was almost getting back into a slump. So I definitely was glad, I was happy to finish this whole series and to get it off my physical TBR, like this book in particular. And I think I explained this in my reading vlog, which will be posted after this whole video. But in my reading vlog, I talked about how it would have been so magical sitting around a teacher in elementary school and having this story being read to us, like just sitting in like a little reading circle. I felt like that would have been such a great time to have listened and been involved in this book, and then have like a whole week of watching all the movies. I think it would have been really good. I think there's 3 of them and I have yet to see them all, but I do believe they're on Disney Plus and I might end up watching them eventually. All of the Chronicles of Narnia finally finished and I rated them all 3 stars. Then, like I said, I ended up finishing Beautiful Darkness. This was also in that video and I rated this one 4 stars as well. This to me was a little bit better than the first one. I enjoyed this one so much more, but it was just because there was some plots. There were still some bad parts to it. More so it was Lena. In this book, there's so many things that happened at the end of the first book that I'm not going to spoil, but basically she just then becomes like self-destructive. She chooses to do bad things because she thinks she's a bad person, and there's a reason behind that. And then the ending of this, there was a little bit of question cliffhanger, kind of sets up for the next book, but I was kind of confused on why 2 authors decided to do what they did with this book. But in all honesty, it was not bad. I had a really great time reading this, and like I said, I rated this 4 stars, but I liked this more than the first book. And then on the second to last day of January, I ended up finishing Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. I had this book sitting on my shelf because I thrifted it probably about a year ago almost now, and I just never got to it because I was waiting to find the 3rd and final book, which is Maybe Now, and I just haven't found it in this specific cover. And I really like these covers more than like the revamped orange with the guitar. I don't like those covers as much. I think my reading vlog will actually be posted many weeks after this video, because I think I'm going to be posting this video in a few days closer to the end of January than when this actual video is released. But in this video, I did talk about how I had a really hard time rating this book, more so because, if you did not know, it does have like a little cheating type trope, and I don't appreciate that. I wanted to rate just that whole topic, that whole part of the book. I just wanted to rate that specifically around 2 stars. I didn't really enjoy that, but at the same time, I like to rate how I feel when I'm reading the book, and I enjoyed it. I've read this book 150 pages a day. I was really enjoying it so much, and I just felt like I glided through it. I feel like most romances are like that. I didn't have to use any brain power, so I did actually end up rating this 4 stars, even though I had that little part that I wish I could have knocked off. I didn't want to honestly rate this 3 stars because it was so much better to me than a 3 star. At the same time, it was just that cheating section that I didn't like, especially because there was like no consequences to the book and everybody got their happily ever after. Those were like my only little critiques for the most part that I had with it, and I just enjoyed reading it. I didn't have a problem too much with it, so I rated it 4 stars. And then on the very last day of January, I actually picked up the novella called Maybe Not. This is the only other book that I have in this little series, I'm gonna call it. It's like a duology with the novella. I did not actually rate this. I wasn't sure if I should rate novellas because I know they're usually like less. This had a lot for 120 pages, 2 or 3 major scenes that were a little bit more descriptive, with it becoming like a romance, let's just say. If you know, you know. So I wasn't necessarily prepared. I don't like to read the back of books. I like to kind of go in a lot blind. And this I originally thought were the same characters as the first book, and it turns out that these were 2 kind of side characters, or 2 roommates who were actually in the story, and I did enjoy that. I kind of liked reading a little bit about that. It gave a little bit of insight. I think I just need to read the last one and then my questions would be answered. I did kind of enjoy it. The little bit of like actual storyline to it, I did kind of enjoy that, and I didn't mind these characters at all. I kind of liked how they were because they're not your typical characters. Those were my thoughts. I didn't really rate this one because I wasn't really sure, since it is a novella, if that makes sense. So here are my physical 6 books, but in total 10 books that I read for January, and I kind of want to go over a little bit of statistics just because I like including a little bit of statistics at the end of my videos, especially my wrap-up videos. So of course, in total this month, we read 10 whole books, which you already know. I read a total of 2,410 pages, which was pretty decent, but 1,138 pages were in one given week, which is kind of amazing to think how I read 1,100 in one whole week, and then the rest of the whole month I somehow accumulated all the way up to 2,410. I had 0 5 stars. I only had 3 4 stars, 6 3 stars, and then 1 book that I did not rate, which was pretty decent, or at least pretty average ratings for the most part. I read 1 thriller, 2 romances, technically 2 YA fantasies, and 5 fantasies, but I'm just gonna group them all together and say 7 whole fantasies in total. I have a page in my reading journal, since I actually use a binder and I print out my pages, and I have my 24 books I wanted to read in 2024, and I crossed off 3 physical books from that list already. I have the Chronicles of Narnia. I just grouped them all together as 1 whole book. I also have Beautiful Creatures and also Beautiful Darkness. Both of those, or all 3 of those technically, were crossed crossed off my 24 books I want to read in 2024, which is a very great goal. And lastly, my favorite book of the month was actually Beautiful Darkness. That was my wrap up for January. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe. I hope to see you in another video here on my channel, and God bless.